I never thought I would be the kind of woman who checks her dead husband's bank account at 3 in the morning. But grief does strange things to people. It had been 8 months since Daniel died in that car accident on Interstate 45. 8 months since the police officer showed up at my door with that look on his face, the one that says your whole world is about to shatter. 8 months since I became a widow at 32 years old. The insomnia started about a month after the funeral. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our last day together. The way he kissed me goodbye that morning, the coffee cup he left on the counter with lipstick marks from where I had used it first, the text message he sent at noon that just said he loved me. Normal things. Unremarkable things. Things that became precious only after they were the last things. My sister Rebecca kept telling me I needed to start going through Daniel's accounts, closing things down, organizing the paperwork that comes with death, but I could not bring myself to do it. Every time I opened his laptop, I felt like I was violating something sacred, like I was erasing him a little bit more. So the laptop sat on his side of the bed, closed, gathering dust, while I slowly fell apart. But that night, that awful sleepless night in late October, something made me reach for it. Maybe it was the dream I had just woken from, where Daniel was trying to tell me something important, but I could not hear him through the glass that separated us. Maybe it was just the crushing weight of loneliness that made me desperate to feel close to him again. I did not know. I just knew that I needed to see something of his, to touch something he had touched, to pretend for a moment that he was still here. I opened the laptop and waited for it to boot up. His wallpaper was a photo from our honeymoon in Costa Rica, both of us grinning like idiots on a beach at sunset. I remembered the German tourist who took that picture, how he had said something in broken English about young love being beautiful. Daniel had tipped him $20. That was Daniel. Always generous. Always kind. His email password was saved, so I clicked into his inbox without thinking. Hundreds of unread messages, most of them spam, some from his work that nobody had bothered to close out, a few from friends who apparently had not heard about his death. I started to close it, overwhelmed, when I noticed something odd. There was an email from his bank, dated just 3 days ago. An alert about a large transaction. My heart started pounding. It had to be some kind of automatic billing, something that had not been canceled yet. I clicked on it. The email said there had been a withdrawal of $4,000 from his checking account at a branch in Austin, Texas. Austin. We lived in Houston. Daniel had never been to Austin without me, and I had certainly never been there in the past 8 months. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it. My hands were shaking. This was not possible. Dead people do not withdraw money from their bank accounts. Dead people do not walk into banks in Austin. I must have been reading it wrong, must have been so sleep-deprived that I was seeing things that were not there. But when I logged into his bank account, using the password I knew because we had always been open about finances, there it was. A withdrawal of $4,000. And it was not the only one. I scrolled through the transaction history, my breath coming faster and faster. There had been withdrawals every few weeks since his death. Small ones at first, 200 here, 300 there, like someone was testing to see if anyone was paying attention. Then they got bigger. 1,000, 2,000, 4,000. I called Rebecca at 3:15 in the morning. She answered on the 5th ring, her voice thick with sleep. Rebecca said, "Jessica, what is wrong? Is it Mom?" I said, "Rebecca, I need you to tell me I am not losing my mind." Rebecca said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Someone is using Daniel's bank account. Since he died, someone has been withdrawing money." There was a long silence. Then Rebecca said, "Are you sure? Maybe it is just automatic payments or something." I said, $4,000 3 days ago in Austin, Texas. That is not an automatic payment." Rebecca said, "Oh my God, Jess, you need to call the police right now." But I did not call the police. Not right away. Because in that moment, sitting there in the dark with Daniel's laptop glowing in front of me, a thought occurred to me that was so impossible, so completely insane, that I almost laughed out loud. What if Daniel was not dead? What if somehow, impossibly, there had been a mistake? What if he was alive? I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like something a person in denial would think, someone who could not accept reality. But I had identified his body. I had seen him in the morgue. Except, I had not really seen him, had I? They had only shown me his face, and it had been so damaged from the accident that I could barely recognize him. They had told me it was him. The police had been so sure. His wedding ring had been on his finger. His wallet had been in his pocket. His car had been totaled. Everything had pointed to it being Daniel. But what if it was not? I spent the rest of that night spiraling down an internet rabbit hole about mistaken identity, about people who had been declared dead and then turned up alive years later. It happened more often than you would think. Not often, but it happened. Cases of switched hospital records, clerical errors, people who wanted to disappear and seized an opportunity. By the time the sun came up, I had convinced myself that it was at least possible, however unlikely, that Daniel might be alive. Rebecca came over at 7 in the morning, still in her pajamas, her hair in a messy bun. She took one look at me and said, "You have not slept at all, have you?" I said, "I cannot sleep. Rebecca, what if he is alive?" Rebecca sat down heavily in the chair across from me. She said, "Jess, honey, I know this is hard, but Daniel is gone. You saw him. The police identified him. There was a funeral." I said, "But what if they made a mistake? What if the body was not his? What if he is out there somewhere and I just buried a stranger?" Rebecca reached across and took my hand. She said, "Why would Daniel let you think he was dead? Why would he put you through that? That does not make any sense." And she was right. It did not make any sense. Daniel loved me. I knew that with every fiber of my being. He would never, could never, do something so cruel. But then what was happening with his bank account? Who was taking that money? Rebecca said, "We need to call the police and report the fraud. Someone clearly stole his information and is using it. That happens all the time with deceased people's accounts." I said, "Then why did they wait 2 months after he died to start? And why in person at a bank branch? If someone stole his information, they would use it online, not walk into a bank where there are cameras." Rebecca did not have an answer for that, so I made a decision. I said, "I am going to Austin." Rebecca said, "What? Why?" I said, "Because I need to see the security footage from that bank. I need to know who withdrew that money." Rebecca said, "Jess, the bank is not going to just show you their security footage. You need to file a police report and let them handle it." But I was not listening anymore. Something had woken up inside me. Something that had been dormant since Daniel died. For 8 months I had been drifting, just existing, going through the motions of life without actually living. For 8 months I had been a ghost in my own house, haunting the spaces where Daniel used to be. But now I had a purpose. Now I had something to do, something to investigate, something that might, however improbably, bring him back to me. I drove to Austin the next day. It was a 2.5-hour drive through flat Texas landscape, mesquite trees and strip malls, and the occasional oil derrick. I had called the bank and been bounced around to 6 different people before finally getting a manager who said that yes, there had been a withdrawal at their branch, and no, they could not give me any information without a police report. So I had filed a police report in Houston, and the detective had been sympathetic but clear that these things take time, that there are procedures, that I should not expect quick answers. But I could not wait. I needed answers now. I needed to know who had walked into that bank and used my dead husband's account. The bank was in a newer part of Austin, all glass and steel and corporate blandness. I walked in trying to look confident, like I had every right to be there, like I was not a grieving widow on what was probably a wild goose chase. I asked for the manager, and after a 10-minute wait, a woman in her mid-40s came out, her smile professional but wary. She said, "I am Jennifer Mills. How can I help you today?" I said, "My name is Jessica Chen. My husband Daniel Chen died 8 months ago, and someone has been using his bank account. There was a large withdrawal here 3 days ago, and I need to know who made it." Jennifer's expression shifted from professional to concerned. She said, "I am so sorry for your loss, Ms. Chen. I understand this must be very distressing. As I believe my colleague told you on the phone, we need a police report to release any information about the account." I pulled out the police report and handed it to her. I said, "I have one. Please. I just need to know who took that money." Jennifer looked at the report, then at me. She said, "Let me check our records. Can you wait here for a few minutes?" I waited for 20 minutes, sitting in one of the uncomfortable chairs in the lobby, watching other customers come and go, conducting their normal banking business, unaware that my entire world was potentially about to shift on its axis. When Jennifer came back, she was holding a folder and her expression was troubled. She said, "Miss Chen, can you come to my office, please?" I followed her to a small office in the back, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. She closed the door and sat down behind her desk. Jennifer said, "I pulled up the security footage from the transaction. Before I show you, I need to ask, have you ever given anyone else access to your husband's account? A family member? A friend? Anyone?" I said, "No. Why? Who was it?" Jennifer turned her computer monitor so I could see it. The footage was grainy but clear enough. A man walked up to the teller window. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses, but I could see enough of his face, enough of his build, his posture, the way he moved. It was Daniel. I must have made some kind of sound because Jennifer immediately said, "Ms. Chen, are you all right? Do you need water?" But I could not speak. I could not breathe. I was staring at the screen, at the impossible image of my dead husband withdrawing money from his bank account. It was him. I knew the way he stood, the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other when he was waiting. I knew the watch on his wrist, the one I had given him for our 3rd anniversary. I knew the small scar on his right hand from when he had cut himself fixing the fence. Jennifer said, "Ms. Chen, do you recognize this person?" I said, "That is my husband, that is Daniel." Jennifer leaned forward. She said, "I thought you said your husband passed away 8 months ago." I said, "He did. I saw his body. I went to his funeral. But that is him. I know it is." Jennifer looked at the screen, then back at me. She said, "Ms. Chen, I think you need to talk to the police about this. If someone is impersonating your deceased husband, that is identity theft and fraud. But if this is actually your husband, then I do not understand what is happening here." I said, "Can I have a copy of that footage?" Jennifer hesitated, then nodded. She said, "I can email it to the detective on your police report. This is definitely something law enforcement needs to investigate." I left the bank in a daze. I sat in my car in the parking lot for almost an hour, just staring at nothing, trying to process what I had seen. It was Daniel. It was impossible, but it was Daniel, which meant one of two things. Either Daniel had faked his death and abandoned me, or I had lost my mind and was seeing things that were not there, projecting my desperate wish for him to be alive onto some random stranger who happened to have a similar build. I called Rebecca from the car. Rebecca said, "How did it go? Did they tell you anything?" I said, "I saw him, Rebecca." Rebecca said, "What do you mean you saw him?" I said, "On the security footage. It was Daniel. He was the one who withdrew the money." There was a long pause. Then Rebecca said, "Jess, are you sure? Are you absolutely sure it was him?" I said, "I would know my own husband. It was him." Rebecca said, Okay, come home right now and we will figure this out together. Do not do anything else, just come home." But I did not go home. Instead, I started driving around Austin, looking for him. It was insane. I knew it was insane, but I could not stop myself. If Daniel was alive, if he was here, then I needed to find him. I needed to understand why. Why would he do this? Why would he let me think he was dead? What could possibly have happened that would make him disappear like this? I drove for hours, checking hotels, restaurants, anywhere I thought he might be. I showed his picture to desk clerks and waiters. Nobody had seen him. Of course, nobody had seen him. Austin was a city of almost 1 million people. Finding one person without any idea where to look was impossible. As the sun started to set, exhaustion finally caught up with me. I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city and collapsed onto the bed. I wanted to cry, but I was too tired even for that. I just lay there, staring at the water-stained ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. My phone rang. It was Detective Morrison, the detective who had taken my police report in Houston. Detective Morrison said, "Ms. Chen, I received the security footage from the bank in Austin. I need you to come down to the station when you get back to Houston. We need to talk about what you saw." I said it was my husband, it was Daniel. Detective Morrison said, "Ms. Chen, your husband died 8 months ago. You identified his body. What you saw on that footage was someone who may resemble your husband, but it cannot be him. What we need to determine is whether this is identity theft or if there is something else going on here." I said, "What do you mean something else?" Detective Morrison said, "I pulled the file on your husband's accident. I want to review it again, make sure everything was handled properly. Sometimes in these cases, there are details that get overlooked. Can you come in tomorrow afternoon? Say around 2 o'clock? I said I will be there. I did not sleep that night either. I kept replaying the security footage in my mind, analyzing every frame, looking for proof that it really was Daniel, or proof that I was wrong. By morning, I was no closer to an answer. I drove back to Houston and went straight to Rebecca's house. She opened the door looking worried and immediately pulled me into a hug. Rebecca said, "You look terrible. Have you eaten anything?" I shook my head. She pulled me inside and made me sit at her kitchen table while she scrambled eggs and made toast. Her husband Mark was at work, and her kids were at school, so it was just us. Rebecca said, "Okay, tell me everything, from the beginning." So I did. I told her about the bank account, about going to Austin, about the security footage. I told her about what Detective Morrison had said about reviewing the accident file. When I finished, Rebecca was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Jess, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about the answer. Is it possible that you are seeing what you want to see? That you want so badly for Daniel to be alive that you are convincing yourself that random person on the security footage is him?" I said, "I thought about that. All night, that is all I thought about. And maybe I am crazy. Maybe grief has broken my brain and I am seeing things that are not real. But Rebecca, I know my husband. I know the way he moves. And that was him." Rebecca reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She said, "Then we will figure out what happened. Together. You are not alone in this." I met with Detective Morrison that afternoon at the Houston Police Department. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and the world-weary expression of someone who had seen too much. He led me to an interview room and pulled out a thick file. Detective Morrison said, "Ms. Chen, I have been reviewing your husband's case file. There are some things I want to go over with you. First, I want to confirm some basic facts. Your husband was driving home from work on the evening of February 15th. His car was hit by a semi-truck that ran a red light at the intersection of Interstate 45 and Highway 90. The truck driver was killed instantly. Your husband's car was crushed. The vehicle burned. Is that correct?" I nodded, feeling sick. I said, "That is what the police told me." Detective Morrison said, "You identified the body 2 days later at the county morgue. Can you tell me about that? What exactly did you see?" I said, "They showed me his face. It was damaged but recognizable. He had the scar on his left eyebrow from when he fell off his bike as a kid. He was wearing his wedding ring. The police said his wallet was in his pocket with his driver's license." Detective Morrison said, "Did you see his hands, his arms, any other identifying features?" I said, "No. They had him covered with a sheet. They only showed me his face." "Why are you asking me this?" Detective Morrison leaned back in his chair. He said, "Because I spoke to the medical examiner who did the autopsy, and there are some inconsistencies in the report. The body was badly burned and damaged from the crash. The identification was based primarily on the wallet, the wedding ring, and facial recognition. But Ms. Chen, facial recognition after that kind of trauma is not exact. And your husband did not have any dental records on file with his dentist because he had not been there in 3 years." I felt the room spin. I said, "What are you saying?" Detective Morrison said, "I am saying that it is possible, however unlikely, that the body we identified as your husband was not actually your husband. The medical examiner ran DNA from the body, but they were comparing it to DNA from items in your home that were assumed to belong to Daniel. If those items were not his, or if they were contaminated, the results could be inaccurate." I said, "So you are telling me that Daniel might be alive? That I might have buried someone else?" Detective Morrison said, "I am telling you that we need to do more investigating. I am going to request a full review of the medical examiner's findings. I am also going to look into your husband's life in the weeks leading up to the accident. His finances, his phone records, his computer activity. If he faked his death, there will be evidence. People do not just disappear without leaving traces." I said, "Why would he fake his death? That does not make any sense. We were happy. We were trying to have a baby. There was no reason for him to leave me." Detective Morrison said, "That is what we need to find out. But Ms. Chen, I need you to prepare yourself for the possibility that if your husband is alive and staged his death, there may be things about him that you did not know. Things he was hiding." I left the police station feeling numb. The idea that Daniel had been hiding something from me, that there was some secret life I knew nothing about, seemed impossible. We had been together for 7 years, married for 5. We told each other everything. We did not have secrets. Or so I had thought. The drive back to Rebecca's house felt surreal. I kept replaying moments from our marriage, looking for clues I had missed. Had there been signs? Times when Daniel seemed distant or preoccupied? Late-night phone calls he took in another room? Unexplained absences? But I could not think of anything obvious. Either Daniel had been an incredible liar, or I had been willfully blind. When I got to Rebecca's house, she was waiting for me on the front porch. She took one look at my face and knew. Rebecca said, "It is bad, is not it?" I said, "He was gambling. For over a year. Lost everything and then borrowed from criminals. He was not the person I thought he was." Rebecca pulled me into a hug and I finally let myself cry. Not the quiet, controlled tears I had been shedding for months, but loud, ugly sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken inside me. I cried for the man I thought I had married. I cried for the life I thought we had been building. I cried for my own naivety, for believing that love and honesty went hand in hand, for thinking I knew someone when I clearly did not. Rebecca just held me and let me cry. She did not try to offer platitudes or solutions. She did not say everything would be okay. She just held me and let me fall apart. When I finally ran out of tears, we went inside and sat at her kitchen table. Mark had taken the kids out to give us privacy. Rebecca made tea that neither of us drank and just sat with me in the silence. Finally, I said, "How do you trust anyone after this? How do you believe that anyone is who they say they are?" Rebecca said, "I do not know, Jess. I wish I had an answer for you, but I do know that not everyone is Daniel. Most people do not keep secrets like this. Most people do not lie to the people they love." I said, "But how do you know? How can you ever really know?" Rebecca said, "You cannot. Not completely. That is the scary part about love, about trusting anyone. You can never be completely certain. You just have to decide that the risk is worth it." I said, "Right now, it does not feel worth it." Rebecca said, "I know. And that is okay. You do not have to trust anyone right now. You just have to take care of yourself." But taking care of myself felt impossible when I did not even know who I was anymore. I had defined myself for so long as Daniel's wife, as half of a partnership I thought was solid and real. Without that identity, I felt lost. I spent the next week in a strange kind of limbo, waiting for answers, trying to go about my normal life while knowing that nothing was normal anymore. I took a leave of absence from my job at the marketing firm where I worked. I could not focus on ad campaigns and client meetings when my entire reality was being called into question. My boss, Patricia, was understanding but clearly confused. She said, "Jessica, take all the time you need. I know losing your husband was incredibly hard. We will be here whenever you are ready to come back." I did not correct her about Daniel being alive. I did not know how to explain something I barely understood myself, so I just thanked her and promised to stay in touch. Rebecca came over every day, bringing food, making sure I ate, keeping me company. She would sit with me while I obsessively went through Daniel's things, looking for clues, for anything that might explain what was happening. But everything was normal. His clothes, his books, his collection of vintage records, his woodworking tools in the garage. There was nothing suspicious, nothing that suggested he had been planning to disappear. Except there was. Now that I knew what to look for, I could see small signs that I had missed before. A notepad where he had been doing calculations, figuring out how much he owed and how long it would take to pay back. Receipts tucked into jacket pockets from cash advances at casinos I did not know he had visited. A prepaid cell phone hidden in his sock drawer that I had never seen him use. Each discovery felt like another betrayal. How many times had he looked me in the eye and lied to me? How many times had I asked if everything was okay, and he had said yes when he was drowning in debt and fear? I found a journal tucked into the back of his closet, behind a box of old tax returns. My hands shook as I opened it. The first entry was dated almost 2 years ago. Daniel had written, "Won $300 at the office poker game tonight." It felt good, really good to beat those guys. They are always bragging about their big wins. For once, I was the one with the story. Jess would probably disapprove, but it was harmless fun. I am not going to make a habit of it. But he did make a habit of it. The journal entries continued, chronicling his descent into addiction. At first, the wins outnumbered the losses. He was confident, even cocky. He wrote about online poker sites and sports betting, about strategies he had learned and systems he was sure would work. He wrote about the thrill of winning, the rush of adrenaline, the feeling of power and control. Then the losses started. Small at first, then bigger. The tone of the entries changed from confident to anxious to desperate. He wrote about chasing losses, about being sure the next hand would be the one that turned everything around. He wrote about lying to me, about the guilt that ate at him, but also about his certainty that he could fix everything before I found out. The last entry was dated a week before his death. Daniel had written, "I do not know how to get out of this. Every option I consider ends with Jess getting hurt. If I tell her the truth, she will leave me. If I file for bankruptcy, the loan sharks will not care. If I run, she will spend the rest of her life wondering what happened to me. If I stay, they might make good on their threats to hurt her. I am trapped in a maze of my own making, and every path leads to pain. I never wanted this. I never wanted to be this person. I just wanted to provide for her, to give her the life she deserves. Instead, I have destroyed everything. I have become the one thing I never wanted to be. A liar? A failure? Someone she cannot trust." Reading those words, I felt a complicated mixture of emotions. Anger that he had put us, in this situation. Grief for the man he had been before the gambling took over. pity for the desperate, broken person who had written those words, and underneath it all, a deep well of sadness for what we had lost. Then Detective Morrison called. He said, "Ms. Chen, I need you to come down to the station. We have found something." I drove there with Rebecca, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Detective Morrison met us in the lobby and led us back to his office. There was another detective with him, a woman named Detective Sarah Park. Detective Morrison said, "Ms. Chen, this is my colleague Detective Park. She has been helping me investigate your husband's case. We have some information that is going to be difficult to hear." I said, "Just tell me, is he alive?" Detective Morrison said, "We do not know for certain yet, but we have reason to believe he might be. We have been going through your husband's financial records, and we found something interesting. 3 months before the accident, Daniel opened a new bank account, a separate account that you were not listed on. He was depositing money into it regularly, about $2,000 a month. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I said, "What? That is not possible. We had joint accounts. We were saving for a house. Where was he getting that money?" Detective Park said, "It appears he was taking on freelance work that he was not telling you about. Consulting work for tech companies. Over the 3 months before his death, he deposited almost $7,000 into this secret account." I said, "Why would he do that? We were not having money problems. There was no reason to hide money from me." Detective Morrison said, "We are still trying to figure that out. But Miss Chen, there is more. In the weeks before the accident, Daniel was researching something. We pulled his search history from his work computer. He was looking up how to change your identity, how to disappear, how to fake your death. I could not breathe. I could not think. This was not Daniel. This was not the man I loved, the man I had built a life with. Daniel was honest and straightforward. He was not the kind of person who kept secrets or looked up how to fake his death." Rebecca put her arm around me. She said, "Detectives, what does this mean? Are you saying that Daniel planned to disappear?" Detective Park said, "That is what it looks like. We are still investigating why. But Miss Chen, we need to ask you some difficult questions. Did your husband seem stressed or anxious in the weeks before his death? Did he mention any problems at work? Any conflicts with anyone? Anything unusual at all?" I tried to think back, but it all felt so far away now, like it had happened to a different person in a different life. I said, "He was stressed about work. He had a big project that was not going well. His boss was putting a lot of pressure on him, but he was not acting strange or secretive. At least I do not think he was." Detective Morrison said, "We are going to need you to go through everything again. His phone records, his emails, his calendar. Anything that might tell us who he was in contact with or where he might have gone. If Daniel is alive, we are going to find him." But I was not sure I wanted to find him anymore. Because the man they were describing, the man who had secret bank accounts and researched how to fake his death, was not the Daniel I knew. And if he had done this, if he had chosen to leave me and let me believe he was dead, then I did not know him at all. Over the next few days, I went through everything with Detective Morrison and Detective Park. We looked at months of phone records, hundreds of emails, credit card statements, receipts. Slowly, a picture started to emerge, and it was not one I wanted to see. The first thing that struck me was how methodical Daniel had been. The phone records showed calls to numbers that, when traced, led to burner phones or disconnected lines. There were text messages that had been deleted from his phone, but the carrier had records. Short, cryptic messages about meetings and payments, about consequences if those payments did not come through. Detective Park spread out printouts across the conference table, each one a piece of the puzzle that was my husband's secret life. She pointed to a credit card statement from 6 months before his death. Detective Park said, "Do you recognize any of these charges, Ms. Chen? These online gaming sites?" I looked at the list. Hundreds of charges, some small, some shockingly large. Names like Lucky Star Casino, Diamond Jackpot, Royal Flush Online. I felt sick. I said, "No, I have never seen these before." Daniel did not gamble. He always said it was a waste of money. Detective Morrison said, "People hide what they are ashamed of, and based on these records, he had a lot to be ashamed of." They showed me more. Bank statements from the secret account, showing deposits from his freelance work and then rapid withdrawals, most of them transfers to the gambling sites. It was like watching someone drown in slow motion, each transaction pulling him deeper under the water. But what hurt most were the emails, not the threatening ones from the loan sharks, though those were terrifying enough. It was the other emails, the ones to himself, that broke me. Daniel had been keeping a kind of diary. sending emails to an account only he knew about, pouring out his fears and his guilt and his desperation. Detective Morrison said, "I know this is difficult, but I need you to read some of these. They might help us understand his state of mind before he disappeared." I took the printed emails with shaking hands. The first one was dated 4 months before the accident. Daniel had written, "I do not know what I am doing anymore. I won at first, I really did. Turned 500 into 5,000. I thought I had found the answer to all our money problems. I was going to surprise Jess with a down payment on that house she loves. But then I started losing. And I kept thinking if I just played a little more, I could win it all back. Now I am in deeper than I ever imagined. $20,000. How did I let it get this bad? I cannot tell Jess. She would leave me. She should leave me. I am not the man she thinks I am." I had to stop reading. The pain was too much. This was Daniel. Really Daniel. Not the stranger I had been trying to convince myself he was. These were his words, his fears, his self-loathing, and I had known nothing about any of it. Rebecca, who had insisted on being there with me, put her hand on my shoulder. She said, "Jess, you do not have to read any more of these right now." But I did. I needed to understand. I picked up the next email, dated 3 months before the accident. Daniel had written, "I borrowed money from people I should not have borrowed from. They found me through the gambling sites, said they could extend me credit. The interest rates are insane, but I thought I could pay them back quickly. I was so stupid, so incredibly stupid. Now they are calling me, threatening me. They know where we live. They know where Jess works. They said if I do not pay them back, they will hurt her. I will do anything to protect her, but I do not have the money. I have been taking on every freelance project I can find, working 16-hour days, but it is not enough. It will never be enough. I am trapped." Tears were streaming down my face. All those late nights I thought Daniel was working on legitimate projects. All those times he said he was stressed about his regular job. He had been trying to dig himself out of a hole he had created, and he had been too ashamed, too scared, to tell me. There were more emails, each one more desperate than the last. In one, he talked about considering bankruptcy, but being afraid the loan sharks would not care about legal protections. In another, he described a panic attack he had at work, how he had locked himself in the bathroom and cried for 20 minutes. In the last one, dated just 2 days before the accident, he wrote about feeling like he was out of options. Daniel had written, "I have been thinking about just disappearing, taking what little money I have left and starting over somewhere far away. But I cannot do that to Jess. She does not deserve to be abandoned. She does not deserve any of this. I got myself into this mess. I need to be the one to get myself out. I just do not know how anymore." Detective Morrison said, "Based on these emails and the timeline, we believe that your husband did not plan to fake his death until the moment of the accident. He was at the scene because he was driving nearby. When he saw what happened, he saw an opportunity, and he took it. It was impulsive, not premeditated." I said, "Does that make it better? Does that somehow make what he did less awful?" Detective Morrison said, "No, it does not. But it might help you understand that he was not some master manipulator who planned this for months. He was a desperate man who made a terrible split-second decision. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to scream. How dare Daniel put me through this? How dare he make such a catastrophic choice without even trying to talk to me first? We were partners. We were supposed to face problems together. But he had shut me out, kept his secrets, and then chosen the most cowardly way out imaginable." Detective Park pulled out another folder. She said, "There is more. We tracked down the loan shark Daniel was dealing with. His name is Victor Reyes. He is known to law enforcement, has a long history of illegal lending and intimidation. We brought him in for questioning." I said, "What did he say?" Detective Park said, "He confirmed that Daniel owed him money, $58,000 with interest. He also confirmed that he had threatened Daniel and that he had mentioned you by name. He said that when the news of Daniel's death broke, he assumed he would never see his money and wrote it off as a loss. He had no idea Daniel was alive until we contacted him." Detective Morrison said, "We are pursuing charges against Reyes for illegal lending and extortion. But Ms. Chen, I need you to be careful. Even though he thinks Daniel is dead, if word gets out that your husband is alive and in custody, Reyes might come looking for his money. You should consider staying with your sister for a while just to be safe." The thought that I might be in danger because of Daniel's choices made me furious. I had not gambled away our money. I had not borrowed from criminals. I had not faked my death. But I was the one who had to deal with the consequences, who had to uproot my life and hide because my husband had been too cowardly to face his problems. We spent hours more going through the evidence. Detective Park showed me surveillance footage from various ATMs where Daniel had withdrawn cash in the weeks after his disappearance. In each one, he looked thinner, more haggard, hunted. He kept his head down, wore different hats and jackets, was clearly trying to avoid being recognized. Watching him move through the world as a ghost, as someone who no longer existed, was surreal. Detective Morrison said, "One thing we noticed is that he never went far from Texas. He stayed in small towns, places where he could blend in, but he never tried to leave the state. We think part of him knew this could not last forever. Part of him wanted to be caught," I said. Or maybe he was just too much of a coward to go through with a real escape. Maybe he was hoping someone else would make the decision for him. Detective Morrison did not argue with that. The investigation continued for another week before they located Daniel and Marfa. In that time, I existed in a strange limbo. I moved in with Rebecca, sleeping in her guest room, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. But everything felt off, like I was walking through a life that did not belong to me anymore. Rebecca's husband Mark was kind, but clearly did not know how to talk to me. Their kids, my niece Emma and nephew Tyler, kept asking why I was staying with them and why I looked so sad. Rebecca told them that I was going through a hard time and needed to be with family, which was true enough without being the whole truth. At night, I would lie in the guest bed and try to imagine what I would say to Daniel when I saw him again. Would I scream at him? Hit him? Would I break down and cry? Or would I just stand there, numb, unable to feel anything at all? I did not know. I could not predict my own reactions anymore. Daniel's betrayal had shattered my sense of who I was, what I wanted, how I felt about anything. My friend Natalie from work called multiple times, worried about me. I had told her I needed time off for a family emergency, but had not given details. I could not face explaining the situation to anyone outside the tight circle of people who already knew. How do you tell someone that your dead husband is actually alive and has been hiding from you for 8 months? It sounded like the plot of a bad movie. Dr. Amanda Wright, the therapist I had started seeing after Daniel's death, fit me in for an emergency session. I sat in her office, the familiar cream-colored walls and soft lighting suddenly feeling like a lie. I had spent months in this room processing my grief, talking about how to move forward after loss, learning to live as a widow, and now none of that was real. Dr. Wright said, "Jessica, I want you to know that everything you felt during the past 8 months was valid. Your grief was real, even if the circumstances were not what you thought they were. You experienced a profound loss. The man you loved, the man you thought you knew, is gone. The person who did this to you is someone else." I said, "But I should have known. I should have seen the signs that he was in trouble." Dr. Wright shook her head. She said, "People are very good at hiding what they do not want others to see, especially from the people closest to them. Daniel made a choice to keep his problems from you. That was his failing, not yours. You are not responsible for his secrets or his choices." I said, "Then why does it feel like I am? Why does it feel like if I had just paid more attention, been a better wife, asked the right questions, this would not have happened?" Dr. Wright said, "Because taking responsibility feels safer than accepting that we cannot control everything. If this is your fault, then you have power. You could have prevented it. But the truth is, you did not have the power to stop Daniel from making terrible choices. And accepting that powerlessness is terrifying. But it is also freeing. Because it means you are not to blame. It means you get to move forward without carrying the weight of his mistakes." Her words made sense intellectually, but emotionally I was not there yet. I was still too angry, too hurt, too confused. Daniel had been in financial trouble. Serious trouble. He had taken out loans I did not know about, almost $50,000 worth. He had been gambling online, losing money steadily over the course of a year. The freelance money he had been hiding was barely covering his losses. He was being threatened by someone, a loan shark maybe, though we could not prove it. The emails were vague, talking about debts and consequences, but they were there. I sat in Detective Morrison's office, looking at the evidence of my husband's secret life, and I felt like I was mourning him all over again. The Daniel I thought I knew had died that day on Interstate 45. This other Daniel, the one who gambled and took out secret loans and lied to me every day for a year, was a stranger. Detective Morrison said, "Miss Chen, I know this is hard, but understanding why he might have wanted to disappear is going to help us find him." I said, "I do not understand. If he was in trouble, why did he not tell me? We could have figured it out together. We could have sold the house, consolidated the debt. Anything. Why would he do this instead?" Detective Park said, "People do desperate things when they feel trapped. Maybe he thought this was the only way out. Maybe he thought he was protecting you by leaving." I said, "Protecting me? He let me think he was dead. He let me grieve for him. He let me fall apart. That is not protection. That is cruelty." And it was cruel. Even if Daniel had been in terrible trouble, even if he had felt like there was no other option, what he had done to me was unforgivable. I had spent 8 months in agony, 8 months wishing I had died instead of him, 8 months barely able to get out of bed in the morning. And the whole time he had been alive, withdrawing money from his bank account, living some other life while I suffered. Rebecca said, "So what now? How do we find him?" Detective Morrison said, "We are tracking the withdrawals. He has been moving around Texas, staying in small towns, using cash. He is being careful, but everyone makes mistakes eventually. We will find him." But I was not sure I wanted them to. Because what would I say to him when they did? What could he possibly say to me that would make any of this okay? 2 weeks later, Detective Morrison called again. He said, "We found him. He is in a town called Marfa in West Texas. We have eyes on him. We are going to bring him in for questioning. But Ms. Chen, I wanted to ask if you wanted to be there. You do not have to be, but I thought you might want the chance to talk to him." I did not hesitate. I said, "I want to be there." Marfa was a 6-hour drive from Houston, a tiny town in the desert near the Mexican border, known mostly for its art galleries and mysterious lights. It seemed like the last place Daniel would go, but maybe that was the point. Maybe he thought nobody would ever look for him there. I drove out with Rebecca, neither of us talking much. What was there to say? We were going to confront my dead husband about why he had faked his death and abandoned me. There were no words for that. The police had set up in a motel on the edge of town. Daniel was staying in a rental house about 2 miles away. Detective Morrison met us in the motel parking lot. He said, "Ms. Chen, we are going to go pick him up now. Are you sure you want to do this? You can wait here, and we will bring him to you." I said, "I need to see where he has been living. I need to see what his life has been like while I have been falling apart." Detective Morrison nodded. He said, "Okay, but you stay in the car. We do not know how he is going to react when he sees police." We drove to the rental house, a small adobe building with a cactus garden out front. It looked peaceful, serene even, the kind of place someone might go to heal or to hide. When the police knocked on the door, I held my breath. Daniel answered. He was thinner than I remembered, with a beard he had never had before, and his hair was longer. But it was him. Unmistakably, undeniably him. When he saw the police, his face went white. When he saw me sitting in the car behind them, he looked like he might pass out. Detective Morrison said, "Daniel Chen, we need you to come with us for questioning regarding identity theft, fraud, and insurance fraud." Daniel did not resist. He just nodded and let them put him in handcuffs. As they led him past the car, our eyes met. I expected to feel anger, rage, hatred even, but all I felt was empty. This man, this stranger with Daniel's face, meant nothing to me. They brought him back to the motel and set up an interview in one of the rooms. I sat in the room next door, watching through a two-way mirror, with Rebecca beside me holding my hand. Detective Morrison said, "Mr. Chen, you understand you are in serious trouble here. You faked your death, committed insurance fraud, and put your wife through 8 months of hell. So I suggest you start explaining why." Daniel looked broken. He said, "I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt Jessica. I thought I was protecting her." Detective Morrison said, "Protecting her from what?" Daniel said, "From my mistakes. I got in deep with some bad people. I owed money to a loan shark, almost $60,000. They were threatening to hurt Jessica to get to me. They said they would burn down our house with her inside. I did not know what to do. I could not pay them. I did not have the money. So when I saw the accident happen, when I saw that truck hit another car, I thought maybe I could use it. Maybe I could make them think I was dead and they would leave her alone." Detective Morrison said, "So you switched places with the victim in the other car? Is that what you are saying?" Daniel nodded. He said, "The driver was already dead. The truck driver too. The cars were burning. I pulled the body out and put my wallet on him, my wedding ring. I knew he would be burned beyond recognition. I knew they would think it was me. Then I just walked away. I hid in the woods until morning. Then I hitchhiked to Austin." I listened to this confession feeling sick. He had desecrated a body. He had let someone else's family wonder what happened to their loved one. He had committed a crime so monstrous I could barely comprehend it. Detective Park said, "And your wife? You just let her think you were dead? You let her grieve for you?" Daniel's voice broke. He said, I thought it would be better. I thought she could move on, find someone better, someone who was not a screw-up. I thought I was giving her a chance at a better life. Detective Morrison said, by making her think she was a widow? By making her identify a stranger's body as yours? You do not get to decide what is better for her. You took away her choice, her agency, her right to know the truth. Daniel looked at the mirror. He said, I know she is watching. Jessica, I am so sorry. I know that does not mean anything now, but I am sorry. I was weak and I was scared and I made the worst decision of my life. I do not expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I never stopped loving you. I stood up and walked to the door. Rebecca said, Jess, where are you going? I said, I need to talk to him. I need to say this to his face. I walked into the interview room. Detective Morrison looked surprised but did not stop me. Daniel looked up at me, and I saw tears streaming down his face. I said, you do not get to do this. You do not get to say you love me and expect that to fix anything. You let me believe you were dead. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Do you know that I wanted to die? That I spent night after night wondering why I had not been in that car with you? You destroyed me, Daniel. You destroyed us. And for what? Because you were scared? Because you made bad choices and did not want to face them? Daniel said, I know I destroyed everything, but I was trying to save you. I said, you were trying to save yourself. You were a coward. You gambled away our money. You borrowed from loan sharks. You lied to me every single day. And then when it all fell apart, instead of being a man and facing it, you ran. You let me bury a stranger. You let me cry at a funeral for someone who was not even you. You let me die inside while you were living in some rental house in the middle of nowhere. Daniel said, what was I supposed to do? If I had stayed, they would have hurt you. They would have killed you to get to me. I said, so you call the police. You get help. You tell your wife what is happening so she can protect herself. You do not fake your death and disappear. That is not love, Daniel. That is not protection. That is abandonment. He had no answer for that. We sat there in silence for a long moment, the weight of 8 months of grief and anger and betrayal hanging between us. Finally, I said, I want you to know something. The man I loved died 8 months ago on Interstate 45. I mourned him. I grieved for him. I will carry that loss for the rest of my life, but you are not that man. You are someone else, someone I do not know and do not want to know. So you do not get to ask for my forgiveness. You do not get to say you love me. You lost that right when you chose to let me suffer while you hid from your problems. I turned and walked out of the room. I did not look back. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and media attention. The story of the man who faked his death broke nationally, and suddenly I was the widow who was not actually a widow. Reporters showed up at my door. People I had not talked to in years reached out with awkward condolences or intrusive questions. The whole thing was a circus. Daniel was charged with insurance fraud, desecration of a corpse, identity theft, and a handful of other crimes. He pled guilty to all of it. The prosecution offered him a deal, 7 years in prison in exchange for his cooperation in identifying the loan sharks he had been running from. His lawyer tried to argue for leniency based on the circumstances, but the judge was not sympathetic. I attended his sentencing. I do not know why. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I needed to see him face consequences. Maybe I just needed to make sure it was really over. The judge said, Mr. Chen, you committed a series of crimes that show a shocking lack of regard for the people around you, especially your wife. You put her through unimaginable pain, and for that, the court is sentencing you to 10 years in the state penitentiary. You will also be required to pay restitution to the insurance company you defrauded, and to the family of the man whose body you desecrated. Daniel looked at me as they led him away in handcuffs. I did not look away. I wanted him to see that I was still standing, that he had not broken me, not permanently. After the sentencing, Detective Morrison found me in the hallway. He said, Ms. Chen, I wanted to let you know that we identified the man who died in the accident. His name was Marcus Rodriguez. He was 38 years old, a construction worker from San Antonio. His family has been looking for him. They are grateful to finally have answers, even though those answers are painful. I said, I would like to reach out to them, if that is okay. I would like to apologize. Detective Morrison said, I think they would appreciate that. And Ms. Chen, for what it is worth, I think you handled all of this with remarkable strength. Not many people could have done what you did. I did not feel strong. I felt exhausted and angry and sad, but I thanked him anyway. I did reach out to Marcus Rodriguez's family. His sister Maria agreed to meet me for coffee. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, two women connected by tragedy and by my husband's terrible choices. Maria said, "I want you to know that I do not blame you. None of this was your fault. You were a victim in this too." I said, "But I should have known. I should have seen that something was wrong with Daniel. If I had been paying more attention, maybe I could have stopped this from happening." Maria shook her head. She said, "You cannot blame yourself for someone else's choices. My brother did not deserve what happened to him, but you did not deserve what happened to you either. Your husband made his choices. We all have to live with them now." We talked for over an hour, sharing stories about Marcus, about Daniel, about the ways loss shapes us. By the end of it, I felt like I had made not a friend exactly, but maybe an ally. Someone who understood what I was going through in a way nobody else could. Slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild my life. I went back to work, threw myself into my projects, into being good at my job. My colleagues were kind but cautious around me, like I was made of glass that might shatter at any moment. Patricia, my boss, checked in with me regularly, making sure I was not taking on too much too soon. But throwing myself into work felt good. It felt like something I could control in a life that had spun completely out of my control. I stayed late at the office, volunteered for the projects nobody else wanted, became the person who always said yes when someone needed help. It was easier than going home to an empty apartment and thinking about everything I had lost. My coworker Melissa noticed. She was a few years older than me, had been through a messy divorce a few years back, and had a way of seeing through my attempts to pretend everything was fine. One evening, as we were both working late, she came to my desk with 2 cups of coffee. Melissa said, "You know, you do not have to prove anything to anyone here. We all know you are good at your job. You do not have to kill yourself to prove it." I said, "I am not trying to prove anything. I just want to stay busy." Melissa sat down in the chair across from my desk. She said, "I get it. After my divorce, I did the same thing. I worked 70-hour weeks, took on every project I could find, anything to avoid being alone with my thoughts. But Jessica, at some point you have to face what happened. You cannot outrun grief or anger or betrayal. Trust me." I tried. It does not work. I said, "What am I supposed to do instead? Sit at home and feel sorry for myself?" Melissa said, "No, but maybe find a balance. Work, yes, but also take care of yourself. See friends, go to therapy, do things that make you happy, not just things that keep you busy." I wanted to argue with her, but I knew she was right. I was using work as a drug, something to numb the pain instead of dealing with it. But dealing with it meant acknowledging how much I hurt, how betrayed I felt, how lost I was, and I was not ready for that yet. I sold the house, the one Daniel and I had bought together with so many dreams and plans. Walking through it for the last time before the closing felt like attending another funeral. Every room held memories. The kitchen where we had cooked dinner together, dancing to music from his phone. The living room where we had spent Sunday mornings reading the newspaper and drinking coffee. The bedroom where we had made love and made plans and talked about the future we thought we would have together. Rebecca came with me to help pack up the last of my things. Most of the furniture went to charity or into storage. I could not bring any of it to my new place. It all carried too much weight, too many ghosts. Rebecca said, "Are you sure you want to do this? You do not have to sell. You could rent it out for a while, give yourself time to decide." I said, "No, I need to do this. I need to start over completely. No reminders, no what-ifs, no looking back." Rebecca hugged me. She said, "You are brave, you know that. Braver than I would be in your situation." I said, "I do not feel brave. I feel like I am barely surviving." Rebecca said, "That is what bravery is sometimes. Just surviving when everything in you wants to give up." I bought a small condo downtown, something that was entirely mine, with no memories attached. It was on the 10th floor of a modern building, all clean lines and big windows that looked out over the city. It was the opposite of the house Daniel and I had shared, which had been a cozy bungalow in a quiet neighborhood. This was sleek and impersonal and exactly what I needed. Rebecca helped me decorate it, and slowly it started to feel like home. We picked out furniture together, chose paint colors, hung artwork that I actually liked instead of compromising with someone else's taste. It was a small thing, but it felt significant. This space was mine, shaped by my choices, filled with my things. Nobody could take it from me or lie to me about it or make me question my reality within these walls. I started therapy in earnest. My therapist, Dr. Amanda Wright, was patient and kind as I worked through layers of grief and anger and betrayal. She helped me understand that what I was feeling was not just about Daniel's betrayal, but about losing my sense of reality. For 8 months, I had believed something that was not true. I had built my grief on a foundation of lies. Learning to trust myself again, to trust my perception of reality, was harder than anything else. Dr. Wright said, "Jessica, I want you to understand something. What Daniel did to you was not just a betrayal of your marriage. It was a kind of psychological abuse. He manipulated your reality, made you question your own perceptions and memories. That kind of trauma goes deep." I said, "But I should have known. There must have been signs." Dr. Wright shook her head firmly. She said, "People who lie and manipulate are often very good at it. They have to be, or they would get caught immediately." Daniel spent over a year practicing deception. He knew you, knew how to reassure you, knew what you wanted to hear. You are not naive or stupid for believing your husband when he told you things were fine. You are human. I said, "Then why do I feel so stupid?" Dr. Wright said, "Because taking the blame feels safer than accepting that someone you loved hurt you deliberately. If you are stupid, then you had control. You could have prevented this. But if Daniel was just cruel and selfish, then you were powerless. And powerlessness is terrifying. But Jessica, accepting that powerlessness is the first step to healing. You cannot control other people. You can only control how you respond to what they do." Those therapy sessions were brutal. Dr. Wright did not let me hide from my feelings or make excuses for Daniel or minimize what he had done to me. She pushed me to feel my anger, to acknowledge my pain, to stop trying to understand or justify his actions. She helped me see that I did not need to forgive him to move on. I just needed to accept what happened and decide who I wanted to be in spite of it. It took time, but gradually I started to find that joy again. Small things at first. A good cup of coffee at my favorite cafe on a Saturday morning. A funny text from Rebecca that made me laugh out loud. A project at work that I was genuinely proud of, not just using as a distraction. The feeling of sunshine on my face during my lunch break. Then bigger things. I reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with during my marriage, not because Daniel had isolated me, but because I had let my friendships drift when I became so focused on building a life with him. My college roommate Vanessa came to visit from California, and we spent a weekend acting like we were 22 again, staying up late talking and laughing and drinking too much wine. Vanessa said, "I am really glad you called me, Jess. I thought maybe after everything that happened, you might want to be alone." I said, "I did for a while." But I realized that pushing people away was just another way of letting Daniel control my life. He does not get to do that anymore. Vanessa raised her wine glass. She said, "To taking your life back, to being stronger than your worst day, to surviving the unsurvivable." We clinked glasses, and I felt something shift inside me, a lightness I had not felt in a long time. Hope, maybe, or just the absence of that crushing weight of grief and betrayal. I took up painting, something I had loved in college but had abandoned when life got busy. I was terrible at first, my landscapes looking like a child's crayon drawings. But there was something therapeutic about putting colors on canvas, about creating something with my hands, about making beauty out of nothing. I joined a painting class at a community center, a group of mostly older women who had been meeting every Thursday night for years. They welcomed me without questions, without pity, just accepted me as someone who wanted to learn. We painted still lifes and portraits and abstract pieces, and nobody judged anyone else's work. It was the most peaceful 2 hours of my week. One of the women, a 70-year-old named Dorothy, pulled me aside after class one night. Dorothy said, "You have a sadness in your eyes, dear. I recognize it. I had that same sadness for years after my husband passed. May I give you some advice?" I said, "Of course." Dorothy said, "Do not rush your healing. People will tell you that time heals all wounds, and they are right, but they forget to mention that time moves at its own pace. You cannot force yourself to be over something just because you think you should be. You have to feel what you feel, for as long as you need to feel it. But also, do not let that sadness define you. You are more than what happened to you. You are more than your pain." I thought about her words a lot in the months that followed. She was right. I was more than Daniel's widow, more than the woman who had been betrayed and lied to. I was Jessica, a good friend, a dedicated worker, a daughter and sister, a woman learning to paint, someone who could still laugh and hope and dream. The pain was part of me now, but it was not all of me. A year after Daniel's sentencing, I did something that surprised even me. I started volunteering at a support group for people whose partners had gambling addictions. At first, I just attended the meetings, listening to other people's stories, finding comfort in knowing I was not alone. But then the facilitator, a counselor named Michael, asked if I would be willing to share my story. Michael said, I think it would help people to hear from someone who has been through something so extreme. Your experience might give hope to people who feel like their situations are hopeless. I was terrified, but I agreed. Standing in front of that group of strangers and telling them about Daniel, about his gambling, about his fake death, about everything that had happened was one of the hardest things I had ever done. My voice shook. I cried. I had to stop several times to collect myself. But when I finished, people came up to me with tears in their eyes, thanking me for my honesty, telling me that my story had helped them feel less alone. A woman named Carla hugged me and said that she had been thinking about leaving her husband but was afraid, and hearing about my strength made her believe she could do it too. That moment changed something in me. I realized that my pain, as terrible as it had been, could serve a purpose. I could use what I had learned, what I had survived, to help other people. My story was not just about what had been done to me. It was about what I had done in response. It was about choosing to survive, to heal, to become stronger. New friendships formed. Hobbies I had neglected returned. A sense of purpose that was not tied to Daniel or to our relationship emerged slowly but surely. A year after Daniel's sentencing, I went back to Marfa. I do not know why exactly. Maybe I needed to see the place where he had hidden, to understand what his life had been like in those months after he disappeared. Maybe I just needed to take back the narrative, to turn this place from a symbol of his betrayal into something else. I rented a room in a small hotel and spent a few days wandering the town. I visited the art galleries, watched the sunset over the desert, stood in the field where the mysterious Marfa light supposedly appeared. It was beautiful and strange and lonely, and I thought about how Daniel must have felt here, isolated and scared and living under the weight of his lies. On my last night there, I wrote him a letter. I had not spoken to him since the sentencing, had not responded to any of the letters he sent from prison, but I needed to say this, needed to put it into words even if he never read them. I wrote, Daniel, I do not know if I will ever send this letter, but I need to write it anyway. I need you to understand what you took from me. You took my husband, my marriage, my sense of security in the world. You took my ability to trust, to believe in the goodness of the people I love. You took 8 months of my life and filled them with a grief so profound, I did not think I would survive it. But here is what you did not take. You did not take my strength. You did not take my resilience. You did not take my capacity to heal and grow and build a new life. I am not the same person I was when you disappeared. That person died along with the version of you I thought I loved. But the person I am now is stronger, wiser, more careful with her heart, but also more appreciative of the people who deserve it. I will never forgive you for what you did. I will never understand how you could have made the choices you made. But I am also not going to let those choices define the rest of my life. I am moving forward, with or without closure, with or without your remorse. I am choosing to live, really live, in a way I have not done since the day that police officer showed up at my door. So this is goodbye, Daniel. Not the goodbye I said 8 months ago at a funeral for someone who was not you. A real goodbye. I am letting you go, letting go of the anger and the hurt and the questions that will never have satisfying answers. I am choosing me. Finally, completely, I am choosing me. I did not send the letter. Instead, I burned it in the desert outside of town, watched the smoke rise into the clear night sky. It felt like a ritual, like I was releasing something I had been carrying for too long. When I got back to Houston, Rebecca picked me up from the airport. She took one look at me and said, "You look different. Good different." I said, "I feel different. Like I finally put down a weight I did not know I was carrying." Rebecca hugged me tight. She said, "I am so proud of you, Jess. You have been through hell and you came out the other side." I said I had help. I could not have done it without you. Rebecca said, "That is what sisters are for. Now come on. I made your favorite dinner, and the kids have been asking about their Aunt Jess all week." Life continued. Not the life I had planned, not the life I thought I would have, but a good life nonetheless. I got a promotion at work. I started dating again, tentatively at first, but with more confidence as time went on. None of the relationships turned into anything serious, and that was okay. I was learning to be happy alone, to find fulfillment in my work and my friendships and my own company. 2 years after Daniel's sentencing, I got a letter from him. I almost threw it away without reading it, but something made me open it. He wrote, "Jessica, I know I have no right to contact you. I know you probably never want to hear from me again, but I wanted you to know that I have spent every day of the past 2 years thinking about what I did to you. I have been working with a therapist in prison, trying to understand why I made the choices I made. I do not have good answers. I was selfish and cowardly, and I hurt the one person who mattered most to me. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know I do not deserve that. I am writing to tell you that I am sorry, truly sorry, and that I hope you have found happiness. You deserve all the good things in the world, Jessica. You always did. I am sorry I could not be the man you deserved. I am sorry I wasted the gift of your love. I hope wherever you are, whatever you are doing, you are healing. You are the strongest person I have ever known, and I know you will build a beautiful life for yourself. I wish I could have been part of it, but I understand why I cannot be. Take care of yourself, Jessica. I will always love you, even though I have no right to. I read the letter 3 times, looking for some emotion, some reaction, but all I felt was a distant sadness for the man he could have been, the life we could have had. The anger was gone. The hurt had faded to a dull ache. In its place was something like peace. I did not write back. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I folded the letter and put it in a box in the back of my closet, alongside the other remnants of my life with Daniel. The wedding photos, the love letters he wrote me when we were dating, the ticket stubs from our honeymoon, a life that felt like it had belonged to someone else. 3 years after everything happened, I met someone new. His name was James, and he was a teacher at the school where Rebecca's kids went. We met at a parent-teacher conference where I was filling in for Rebecca, and he made a joke that actually made me laugh, a real genuine laugh that surprised us both. We started dating slowly, cautiously. I told him everything on our 3rd date, the whole story about Daniel and the fake death and the betrayal. I expected him to run, to decide I was too complicated, too damaged. But instead, he listened. Really listened. And when I finished, he said, "That must have been incredibly painful. I am sorry you went through that, but I am glad you are here now." James was patient with my hesitations, with the walls I had built around my heart. He did not push for more than I was ready to give. He showed up consistently, kept his promises, was honest even when the truth was uncomfortable. Slowly, carefully, I let him in. We got married on a beach in California, just us and a handful of close friends and family. Rebecca was my maid of honor. Her kids were the flower girls and ring bearer. It was small and simple and perfect. Everything my first wedding was not. As we said our vows, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain and the grief and the slow, hard work of healing. The person I was standing there on that beach was not the same person who had opened that laptop at 3 in the morning and discovered her dead husband's bank account was being used. That person had been naive, trusting, unprepared for the ways life can shatter you. The person I was now was stronger, wiser, more careful, but also more grateful. James said his vows, promising to be honest, to communicate, to choose me every day. When it was my turn, I said, "I promise to trust you, even though trust is hard for me now. I promise to be open with you, even when it is scary. I promise to choose this, us, every single day, with full knowledge of what love can cost and full hope for what it can give." We kissed as the sun set over the Pacific, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Hope. Not the naive hope of someone who believes nothing bad can happen, but the hard-won hope of someone who knows that bad things do happen and that you can survive them and even, eventually, thrive. Life with James was different from life with Daniel. We talked about everything, the big things and the small things. We kept no secrets. We had a joint account, but also separate accounts, because I needed that sense of financial independence, that knowledge that I could take care of myself if I needed to. James understood and never questioned it. We bought a house together, one with a big backyard for the kids we hoped to have someday. I learned to be happy there, to make new memories that were not overshadowed by the past. We planted a garden, adopted a rescue dog named Cooper, hosted dinner parties with friends. It was a normal life, a good life, the kind of life I thought I had lost forever. 4 years after marrying James, I had a daughter. We named her Hope, because that is what she represented. A new beginning, a future that was not defined by my past. When I held her for the first time, I cried. Not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. Gratitude that I had survived. Gratitude that I had found my way back to joy. Gratitude that I had not let Daniel's betrayal destroy my capacity to love and trust and hope. Rebecca came to visit us in the hospital, bringing flowers and balloons and enough baby clothes to dress a small army. She held Hope and said, "She is perfect, Jess. You did it. You built the life you deserved." I said, "We did it. I could not have gotten here without you." Rebecca said, "That is what family does. We show up, we hold each other up, we do not let each other fall, and if we do fall, we help each other get back up." Sometimes, late at night when I am feeding Hope or rocking her to sleep, I think about the person I was before Daniel disappeared. I think about how certain I was of my life, how secure I felt in my marriage, how I never imagined that the foundation I had built could crumble so completely. I think about the woman who discovered that bank account activity and thought maybe, impossibly, her husband was still alive. I think about how desperate she was, how lost. And then I think about the woman I am now, a woman who survived betrayal and grief and rebuilt herself from the ground up, a woman who learned that strength is not about never falling apart, but about finding the courage to put yourself back together. A woman who knows that trust is a choice you make every day, that love is not a guarantee but a risk worth taking. I would not wish what happened to me on anyone. The pain was too great, the betrayal too deep, the loss too profound, but I also would not change it, because it made me who I am. It taught me that I am capable of surviving things I never thought I could survive. It showed me the depth of my resilience, the power of my will to keep going even when everything in me wanted to give up. Daniel will be released from prison in 4 more years. I do not know what I will do when that happens. Part of me hopes he has changed, that he has done the work to become a better person. Part of me does not care. He is not part of my life anymore, not part of my future. Whatever happens to him, whoever he becomes, is no longer my concern. What matters is what I have built, the life I have created with James, the family we are raising, the peace I have found. I wake up every morning grateful, not because everything is perfect, but because I know how precious this all is. I know how easily it could be taken away. I know how hard I fought to get here. Sometimes people ask me how I did it, how I survived something so devastating. They want a simple answer, a neat formula for resilience, but there is not one. Healing is messy and non-linear and different for everyone. What worked for me was choosing, over and over again, to keep going, to get out of bed even when I did not want to go to therapy even when it was painful, to let people help me even when I wanted to isolate, to trust again even when trust felt impossible. It was choosing, every single day, to believe that there was still good in the world, still reasons to hope, still possibility for joy. It was refusing to let Daniel's betrayal define me, refusing to let his choices determine my future. It was taking back my power, my agency, my right to a happy life. Happy. On Hope's first birthday, we threw a party in our backyard. Rebecca came with her family. James's parents flew in from Oregon. Friends from work and from the neighborhood gathered to celebrate. As I looked around at all these people who loved me, who had supported me through the darkest time of my life, and who were now celebrating this joyful moment with me, I felt overwhelming gratitude. James came up behind me and wrapped his arms around me. He said, "What are you thinking about?" I said, "I am thinking about how far I have come, how different my life is from what I thought it would be, how grateful I am for all of it, even the hard parts." James kissed my temple. He said, "You are amazing. You know that? The way you survived what happened, the way you built this life, it is incredible." I said I had a lot of help. I could not have done it alone. James said, "But you did do it. That is what matters. You are here. We are here. And our daughter is about to destroy that cake." We both laughed as Hope, who had just started walking, toddled over to the birthday cake with determination in her eyes. Rebecca swooped in and redirected her, and everyone laughed. It was a perfect moment, ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. That night, after everyone had gone home and Hope was asleep, I stood in her nursery watching her breathe, marveling at the tiny, perfect human we had created. I thought about all the moments I had almost given up, all the nights I had been so consumed by grief I did not think I would see morning. I thought about how close I had come to letting Daniel's betrayal destroy me. But I had survived. More than survived, I had thrived. I had built a new life, a better life, a life filled with love and purpose and hope. And as I stood there in the soft glow of the nightlight, listening to my daughter's gentle breathing, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The journey had been long and painful and full of moments when I thought I could not take another step. But I had kept going, kept choosing to heal, kept believing that there was something better waiting for me on the other side of the pain. And I had been right. This was not the life I planned, but it was the life I had earned, the life I had fought for, the life I deserved, and it was beautiful.